Hezbollah. Well, we don't know exactly what and when, but it seems like it's pretty imminent based on what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so
there was a year. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
There was a UN Security Council resolution back in 2006 at the conclusion of the Second Lebanese War. And that resolution is numbered 1701. And it was agreed to by all parties. And it called for, including Lebanon, that Hezbollah was to not have any forces south of the Litani River. The Litani River is a river in Lebanon that runs east and west. It discharges into the Mediterranean Sea. It's about, I think, 12 kilometers, or maybe a little more, from the north of the Israeli border. And it puts them pretty much out of rocket range. Their missiles can still strike Israel, but the main armaments they have are rockets that have a range of around 10 miles or so. So this would put them out of range of Israel. And of course, they ignored it. And the world doesn't seem to care. There's no Security Council meeting today. They're all going to meet, I think, tomorrow to argue about the pagers and the walkie-talkies, but no one cares that Hezbollah is violating a Security Council resolution and using that time and space to launch unprovoked attacks on the Israeli population. And just to add to what Ephraim said, it's not just the people are sort of living in a hotel. Kids can't go to school. People who have businesses in the north are basically bankrupt. They have no business anymore. If they were selling falafel, or they were selling a dry cleaner shop, or they had a restaurant, or whatever, there's no income. They have no livelihood, these people. And it's an intolerable situation. They've been under it for almost a year now. And I think everyone's lost patience.
Eric, we read over here that there's also, it's a point of almost unnecessary dialogue here in the United States, but it's this idea that there is dissension in the government, and that dissension is one of the things that provoke, this problem. When you guys are describing a situation that has to be responded to. Is there trust among the population that the government can get out of its own way, or is that being overblown here in the United States?
Prime Minister Netanyahu, I don't know what the actual percentage of the polls are saying today, but in most recent polls, his popularity declined. It was really low at the start of the war, and it's climbed up, it's inched back up a bit since. And he's being criticized from many different sides, okay? So, some perhaps fairly, some unfairly. I'm not sitting here in judge of him. But one of the criteria that he's receiving the most criticism on is that he's not more aggressive in the north. The population in Israel, right and left, it's, one of his big opponents, a guy named Yair Golan, who leads a very left-wing party. And he's just as critical on this issue as people on the right. And that is, what's happening on the Lebanese border is totally unacceptable. We've waited way too long. We've given the United States an opportunity for 10 months now to try to negotiate peacefully for Hezbollah to move its forces back north of the Litani River. And everything gets ignored and no one's paying attention. And with or without U.S. approval, a large segment of the population is very upset that Netanyahu is not letting the forces be more aggressive.
Do you think
one of the big?
Do you think that because you stated that this is a targeted toward the leadership of Hezbollah, which they successfully did, and it was clever, obviously, of how they did it, because you said that Hezbollah actually gave these devices to their people and their leaders, so they knew who they were, and they kind of took care of that short term. Would it? And it seems like even the news today is that Israel is attacking the northern or of course the southern border of Lebanon, but they're making now they are attacking the missile sites, etc. Directly. Is this now the start, do you think, of, hey, you're going to take, while you have the chance, you're going to take the offense and actually try to do what you did with Hamas and just say, you know what, enough's enough, and we're going after it?
I'm not sure that there's been any, maybe Ephraim, you can pipe in here too. I'm not sure that today there's been any pickup or more than ordinary from previous days of activity. Hezbollah stepped up its barrages to the level where it's now, 30 or 40 rockets a day is pretty typical. And on a nightly basis, mostly at night, Israeli jets will go into southern Lebanon and target facilities they know Hezbollah has, as well as the launchers that they've launched. On occasion, they go further north near the Syrian border, where the missiles, not the rockets, where the longer range missiles are kept, and where there's also manufacturing facilities run by Hezbollah, where they're manufacturing more and more rockets and other things. And they've hit quite successfully various facilities there. So as of this hour, I'm not sure I detect anything out of the ordinary from the past week or two, other than a lot of bellicose announcements from Lebanon, as well as our military.
I would just add to that there are a lot of soldiers are being moved up to the north. And people are being moved out of the Gaza area so that there will be a more minimal force over there. People to be moving up to the north, but there's been we're guessing like you, but it does seem that this is an opportunity that I personally hope Israel will take advantage of and move in there and do what needs to be done.
Yeah,
I concur with Ephraim's opinion on that.
yeah. So if that's so, that they now say what we did in Gaza with Hamas, we now have to do with Hezbollah, and you set it up, properly that this is a terrorist organization that is trying to eliminate Israel, who on the surface desires peace and economics and just everybody to enjoy life, and you're not trying to attack anybody else, but you're defending yourself. Let's assume that they go that direction, which, by the way, makes sense. And it would seem to me, based on what they did over the last couple of days, that there's now a moment where they really could press an attack and use what's happened to their advantage. So let's assume that happens. Two questions. Will they attempt to go as far as they did with Hamas, where they just kept going after it and after and after it, that has basically completely neutralized them, at least for the moment? And that's question one. Question two is, since Hamas can't do anything, and let's say Hezbollah can't do anything, will Iran do something?
Well, I should say that I'm a rabbi, and not so I don't know how much my I observe and I live here and etc. But I'm not an expert on the subject. But what I would say is that I personally don't think that Iran is going to get involved. I think the whole reason they set up these proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah is to avoid coming to a direct conflict with Israel. And so in Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen, they have lots of people that they have armed and given weapons to and given tons and tons of money so that Lebanon can suffer the consequences, and the people in Gaza can suffer the consequences when Israel has no choice but to retaliate to protect itself. So I think they're not looking for a direct conflict. So I doubt they'll get involved. And how far Israel has to take it? Look, in Gaza, Israel had to decimate Hamas, which we have not finished doing yet. And because if they have a little bit of power, their whole goal is to remain standing, even if beaten, so that they can rebuild themselves after we finish in Gaza. And we have to make sure that doesn't happen, so they don't regrow. How far we have to go in Lebanon with Hezbollah, I do not know. It's not quite the exact situation. So it could be just pushing them back a lot will be sufficient for our needs.
So my view on this is that, first of all, you need to understand that Iran has announced that in the year 2040, Israel will no longer exist. It has a clock, like sitting in, I don't know what square in Tehran, where it's ticking off the hours to 2040, when they claim and insist, and they have a plan. It's quite a strategic plan when you look at it, for our destruction. And it involves, and also as they say here, Iran is willing to fight Israel to the last Arab, meaning the Persians are not Arabs, they're a different race. So they're willing to let their proxies fall over themselves in the attempt to kill and annihilate us at Iran's wish. So the front in Lebanon is quite different from Gaza. It is not nearly as urban, meaning, and most of the civilians, not all, many of the civilians in southern Lebanon have evacuated their homes. They're living north of the Litani River at the moment. I don't know what the number is. It's the tens of thousands. So you won't see the deep urban type fighting that you see on your TV screens, the results of, that looks like after Armageddon or something in Gaza. But the tunnels that Hezbollah has constructed are deeper and more fortified and more sophisticated than what Hamas constructed in Gaza. And I don't know what the army has planned. They learned a lot, the army, with regards to how to deal with the tunnels in Gaza. They know a lot more now than they knew a year ago on how to manage them. I don't know what they know in terms of how to deal with the ones that are sitting in Lebanon. It's my guess that the people thinking through the long-term strategy of this are thinking along the lines of, assuming we can succeed, the goal is to push Hezbollah back across the Litani River, and Israel's going to occupy. It's not going to permit settlements to occur or grow or civilians to go there. But until the government and the people of Israel are convinced that the Lebanese army, not Hezbollah, but the Lebanese army or some other force is capable of managing this area so we don't see endless rocket fire on a regular basis, I don't think there's going to be any inclination from either the government or the army to pull back from the Litani River. The previously Israel held that area and pulled back, and it did so because the army was losing roughly 15 soldiers a year from sniper fire, rocket fire, whatever. Letting Hezbollah stay in that area would cost us much more than 15 soldiers a year. So I had to put things in sort of that kind of evaluation, but that's just a world we live in here.
Yeah. On the 100,000 people you said have been vacated from your northern border, where did they go? Where do they go?
They're all sitting there. Israel is paying for them to sit in hotels. All the hotels that are not being used by the tourists that aren't coming are sitting in hotels in all over the country, or they're having rent subsidized. And that may sound nice, but it's not nice. It's not nice when you have your 3 kids and 2 parents in one hotel room, and now you have to do laundry, and they're hanging their laundry in the hallways, and you have to, and you're with another 100 families packed into these hotels for months and months and months on end without work, trying to find a place for your kids to go to school. It's miserable, and it's not to mention that it's costing the country an absolute fortune on top of the war, which is costing a fortune. But subsidizing everybody's salaries, putting them all up. On top of that, of course, all the people that were in the area around Gaza. There was like another 100. I think it was 350,000 people initially for the first 6-8 months. Now many of the people around the Gaza area have returned, but Israel had to put them all up in hotels and subsidize their salaries for months. So this on top of everything else, the war is causing a lot of discomfort, a lot of dislocation, a lot of psychological trauma, a lot of difficulties for children, and costing an absolute fortune for a tiny country that already is stretched economically. We spend more money per capita on defense than any other country in the world, virtually.
Yeah,
as much as the United States.
As you think of, that was a question I had about the the funding and the economy. We know Israel has been, had a positive surplus, but they can't sustain this, right? What do they predict just economically being able to handle all this?
There's not a lot of talk about it, but it's they're expecting the defense budget to be 10% of the GDP or more, which is, I think in the United States it's like 3% or something, and the United States is spends one of the most on defense of any country. I don't know. It's just to give you a perspective, like for every missile that they send from or rockets that they send from Gaza, which cost them like $100 to make, we spend, what is it, Eric, like $10,000 or $100,000 on every dome, $100,000 on every defensive rocket to take one of those $100 rockets down, because they're targeting our civilians. So frankly, I don't. It's hard to think about it, but and that's, by the way, one of their strategies is to try and bankrupt us and to to create an unsustainable economic situation. And of course, the whole world jumps on the humanitarian aid for the people in Gaza, but Israel's sort of on its own when it comes to our economic problems. And many countries even talk about arms embargoes to make things even worse.
Right.
What would you say, if you don't mind sharing, the spiritual climate? How has all of this changed and impacted that? Jews, what are they thinking? Where does this fall into their scripture? How are they responding to God in the midst of this? I'd love to hear any insight
if we could, Kathy, let's hold that just for a second, because we're about at the end of this one.
Okay.
And that's the topic we want to do of number 2, so we can really get into that aspect of it. And just one more thing before we finish this session would be, would that, what you just said, Ephraim and Eric, would that actually stimulate Netanyahu and Israel government to press the war faster and try to eliminate their ability to keep attacking you in the short term, so that you could return to a semi-normal and then not go bankrupt, really, which would be what I can see their strategy would be. If they can just keep making you spend money that you don't have, it's gonna cause trouble.
Well, when we started this, of course, I used the word resilient, and Israelis, as well as our economy, are quite resilient. There's still, housing prices are still pretty high. Some projected to go up, maybe not in the areas near Lebanon or Gaza, but elsewhere. The tech firms some are recovering quite nicely. There's a few firms that were just basically turned away. I think one was something like 80 billion. I forget the number. It was tens of billions of dollars offer from Google to buy them, and they said no, we're going to go public on our own. So there are a lot of success stories. Our defense companies here are having a banner year, as you might guess. Many countries around the world buying our arms. But in the meantime, as Ephraim said, we're having a very severe budget crisis. I do believe that the government will have to raise taxes to cover this in some form or another. And I've heard talk about, we have a value-added tax here, which is like the equivalent of the sales tax in the United States.
Yep.
Right now, that's 17% on everything purchased, and that will probably, my guess, will go up. Although that hurts the poor more than anybody. But they have to raise the taxes from somewhere, and to cover this. Now, what we didn't acknowledge before is that the United States, the Biden administration, I think 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, in a package bill, passed a bill that would help us in purchasing arms from the United States. So they're granting us an additional amount of funds for this year, and to help us defer the cost of purchasing. I think we're buying more F-35 jets from, I think it's Lockheed who makes them, I think.
Yep, Lockheed Martin.
And we're buying several other things from the portfolio of American defense companies help our defense budget.
Yeah.
So we're grateful for that, but it's going to hurt our economy. It's going to affect us.
Yeah.
We have no choice.
Yeah. Do
By the
you
way,
feel?
something else I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Something else I'm not sure your listeners understand is given the nature of this part of the world, using the word peace is really almost a misnomer. Okay. We may succeed in pushing back Hezbollah beyond the Litani River, but we know that's not the end because our neighbors will continuously attack us. Now, what will probably buy us, if we're lucky, is maybe 15 or 20 years of reasonable peace. So our economy can recover, we can grow and have a normal life here. But we all know in the back of our minds that they'll come back to battle when they can. And the same thing is true for Iran.
Wow.
Any thought that they will, because of the, like you said, the misery that's going on with the people that have been vacated, will this cause Israel to press the war faster and say, you know what, we can't just let them keep doing what they're doing. We have to do something.
There was a contingent of the higher ranks of the army in October. It was released October to launch a surprise attack in Lebanon. And the prime minister brought in a couple other people from the opposition into a war cabinet, and they managed to talk the military leaders out of it. So, I think that Ephraim, you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
I was going to say there's a lot of people in Israel would like that to happen, and the main reason it seems that Israel has not, well, two reasons off the top of my head. One is that we're in a multi-front war, in addition to still a very difficult battles that are going on in Gaza continuing. We also have a very serious terror problem in Judea and Samaria, what's commonly known as the West Bank. There's been a huge resurgence of armed attacks by terrorists against Jews in that whole area and trying to infiltrate all over Israel. So that's required a lot of extra army presence. And on the northern border, Hezbollah is considered a much more well-armed and sophisticated army than anything that Hamas has. What is basically holding us back is world pressure, because they are surrounding themselves by civilians, and anything Israel does to try and defend itself and to eliminate its enemies is going to involve civilian casualties, and that is 150% their responsibility, because they started the war and they surround their fighters and their infrastructure and their arms with civilians. And there's no way we can stop them, even though Israel works extremely hard to try and prevent civilian casualties, but they work extremely hard to maximize civilian casualties because they know that will bring world pressure on us. And that's why Israel doesn't do things faster, is because the world pressure that will happen, the civilian casualties, and then embargoes against Israel, arms embargoes, you name it, really ties Israel's hands from doing what it normally would want to do to defend its population.
Yeah, get that. Well, thank you, both of you, so much for all this information. And we do want to, we'll do our next session here, which will be, we want to talk about the spiritual temperature and how you view all this spiritually. From our perspective, we'll talk about this. We know that Israel doesn't get eliminated by Iran. So,
right.
So at least from what the Bible has to say. So, we'll talk about that. But Rabbi Ephraim, thank you so much. And Eric, thank you so much and Denny coming on and helping us receive the truth of all this. And it'll be really interesting. We're going to obviously be watching this now day after day after day. And we'll have you back on shortly to try to interpret, what happened. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you have thank you to the listeners for joining us too. If you have questions from today's broadcast, send them in to us at questions@abideministries.com, and we will do our best to talk about them. Always a pleasure to have this conversation, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.
Oh, is this, can I talk?